Lois, I can't take out the garbage because I'm at the office and they're making me stay late.
Peter, the caller ID says you're calling from the kitchen. In fact, I can see you.
Can you see me now?
No.
Okay, now I'm at the office.
Everyone thinks ratings are what decide if a show lives or dies. But not all things are what they seem. We've uncovered the unbelievable stories behind hit shows that were canceled for insane reasons, like one that was taken off the air because of a hunger strike in another country. Get ready, because the truth is stranger than fiction. 1. Futurama.
Did you really think you'd need all this junk in the afterlife?
Afterlife? If I thought I had to go through a whole nother life, I'd kill myself right now.
Many people are crazy about the show The Simpsons, but in 1999, its creator Matt Groening launched a second masterpiece, a sci-fi comedy called Futurama. The show followed a pizza delivery boy named Fry, who is accidentally frozen and wakes up 1,000 years in the future. It was brilliant, funny, and full of heart. Critics loved it. It won multiple Emmy Awards, and it had a fiercely loyal fan base. The show was pure television gold. So why in the world did it get canceled? The hard truth is, the network Fox seemed to actively hate its own show. They gave Futurama one of the worst time slots a show can have, 7 p.m. on Sunday nights. This spot is a death sentence for a comedy aimed at young adults because it's constantly preempted by sports. Football games would run long, and Futurama would just not air that week, with no announcement. The thing nobody tells you is just how bad it got. The network would move the show around the schedule without telling anyone, making it impossible for even the most dedicated fans to find it. They were treating a premium show like it was a cheap infomercial. The inconsistent scheduling destroyed the ratings, giving the network the excuse they needed to cancel it after 4 seasons. It was a classic case of a network sabotaging its own product. But if you think network sabotage is bad, wait until you hear about a critically acclaimed show that was canceled because its new owners were afraid of its powerful message. 2. Underground.
Why didn't you stop him?
Who?
Mr. Bill. With the whip? Why didn't you protect him?
In 2016, a show called Underground premiered, and it was like nothing else on television. It was a high-stakes historical thriller about the brave men and women of the Underground Railroad. The show was a massive hit. It had a 100% rating on Rotten Tomatoes. It was praised by critics for its powerful storytelling and amazing performances, and it was the #1 scripted cable show on its night. It was important, it was successful, and it was telling a vital American story. And then, after just 2 seasons, it was gone. The reason is one of the most cynical things to ever happen in the TV industry. The network that aired the show, WGN America, was in the process of being sold to a new, more conservative company. The new executives looked at their lineup and decided that a show about the history of slavery in America, no matter how popular or acclaimed it was, just didn't fit with the new brand they wanted to build. To put it mildly, they were afraid of the subject matter. They dropped the show purely for political and ideological reasons, ignoring its success completely. A show getting axed for being too historically honest is shocking. But our next show was also a historical epic, and it ended because its own lead actor decided to leave, forcing the writers to make a truly wild choice. 3. Robin Hood.
I've waited for you. I knew I would find you again. It's time.
The BBC's version of Robin Hood that aired in the mid-2000s was a fun, action-packed adventure series. It had sword fights, romance, and a charismatic lead actor named Jonas Armstrong playing the legendary hero. The show was a solid hit, especially in the UK. It was a perfect piece of family entertainment that put a modern spin on a classic tale. The show was cruising along, set for a long run. But then, the star of the show decided he was done. Jonas Armstrong announced that he felt he had done all he could with the character and that he would be leaving after the 3rd season. Now you might think they would just recast the role. Happens all the time, right? Well, the creators of this show decided to go in a completely different and frankly insane direction. Instead of replacing Robin Hood, they decided to get rid of him. In the final episode of Season 3, they had Robin take a fatal wound. And if that wasn't shocking enough, they also took out his true love, Maid Marian, in the very same episode. They basically wiped out the two most important characters, making it impossible for the show to continue. Ending a show by getting rid of its main character is a bold move. But our next story is about an animated show that was a huge hit, but got caught in the crossfire of a massive corporate takeover. 4. The Spectacular Spider-Man.
I never asked to be Spider-Man. I never asked for these powers. I never knew it would mean a bashed-up hand, a hard 9 p.m. curfew, no job.
For many fans, The Spectacular Spider-Man is the single greatest animated version of the web-slinger ever made. Airing in 2008, the show was a perfect blend of classic comic book action, high school drama, and witty humor. It had amazing animation, smart writing, and it perfectly captured the spirit of Peter Parker. The show was a massive critical success and had a growing, passionate fan base. The creators had a 5-season plan all mapped out, with direct-to-DVD movies to fill in the gaps. But then, the unthinkable happened. In 2009, Disney bought Marvel Comics for $4 billion. This was a monster deal that changed Hollywood forever. The thing nobody tells you is that at the time, the TV rights for Spider-Man were held by a different company, Sony, who was producing the show. The new deal between Disney and Marvel meant that Sony lost the rights to produce any more animated Spider-Man shows. Just like that, their hit show was legally dead in the water. Disney, of course, went on to make their own Spider-Man cartoon, Ultimate Spider-Man, but for fans of Spectacular, it was a heartbreaking end to a show that was just hitting its stride. A corporate buyout is a brutal way for a show to die. But our next show was also a huge hit, and it was canceled because the network thought its audience was too old. 5. Longmire.
He could have got out of town. Well, he still had the chance.
Longmire was a classic modern Western. Based on a series of popular novels, the show followed Walt Longmire, the dedicated and unflappable sheriff of a county in Wyoming. It was a smart, character-driven crime drama with a beautiful cinematic feel. And it was a huge hit for the A&E network. For 3 seasons, it was their most-watched original scripted series of all time, pulling in millions of loyal viewers every week. A show like that should be a network's crown jewel, right? Well, not exactly. After the 3rd season, A&E did the unthinkable and canceled their #1 show. The reason they gave was completely mind-boggling. They said the show's audience was too old. You see, in the world of television advertising, there's something called the key demographic, which is viewers aged 18 to 49. This is the group that advertisers are willing to pay the most money to reach. While Longmire had millions of viewers, a large chunk of them were over the age of 50. The network decided that even though the show was a massive hit, they couldn't sell ad time for a high enough price. They literally canceled their most popular show because they didn't like the people who were watching it. Canceling a show for having the wrong kind of fans is just insulting. But our next show was a comedy masterpiece that was canceled because the network thought it was too funny and required too much attention. 6. Police Squad.
I'm Captain Frank Drebin. I understand you had a pretty rough time.
Yeah, it was pretty bad.
Cigarette?
Yes, I know.
Before the Naked Gun movies became comedy classics, there was the TV show that started it all. Police Squad. Created by the legendary comedy trio of Zucker, Abrahams, and Zucker, the same minds behind the movie Airplane. This show was a brilliant spoof of old-school cop dramas. It starred the hilarious Leslie Nielsen as the deadpan detective Frank Drebin. The show was packed wall-to-wall with visual gags, puns, and absurd humor. You had to watch it closely, because if you blinked, you'd miss 3 jokes. The show was critically acclaimed as a work of genius. So, of course, the network canceled it after only 6 episodes. The reason given by the ABC network president at the time is one of the most infamous and ridiculous excuses in TV history. He said, and this is a real quote, that the viewer had to watch it in order to appreciate it. He was saying that the show failed because you couldn't do other things, like your laundry, while it was on. He believed that the very thing that made the show brilliant, its dense and clever humor, was a flaw. To put it mildly, this was a profoundly stupid reason to cancel a show, and the creators later got their revenge when the movie versions made hundreds of millions of dollars. Killing a show for being too smart is bad enough. But our next show was also a critically loved comedy, and it was canceled because the network just didn't think it fit their brand. 7. Happy Endings.
Alex, I love you!
What's happening here?
I skipped the rehearsal, but I'm pretty sure that guy's in love with Alex.
Airing from 2011 to 2013, Happy Endings was a sitcom that felt like a modern version of Friends, but faster, weirder, and arguably funnier. It was about a group of 6 friends in Chicago whose lives are thrown into chaos when the couple that brought them all together breaks up at the altar. The show had one of the best ensemble casts in recent memory, with lightning-fast dialogue and hilarious, quirky storylines. Critics adored it, and it developed a cult following of fans who considered it one of the smartest comedies on TV. But the show was on the ABC network, which at the time was home to huge, broad family comedies like Modern Family. What many overlooked is that network executives often have a very narrow idea of what their brand is. And for ABC, Happy Endings, with its niche humor and fast-paced jokes, just didn't fit. They saw it as being too clever and not mainstream enough for their audience. Even though the show had decent ratings and a ton of critical buzz, the network shuffled it around the schedule, a classic sign that they had lost faith in it. After 3 brilliant seasons, they pulled the plug, choosing to go with shows they felt were a safer, broader fit for the ABC brand. Network branding is a silly reason to cancel a hit. But our next show was a massive global phenomenon, and it might have been canceled to avoid helping a rival company. 8. Star Wars: The Clone Wars.
The only Jedi we can spare are Skywalker and Kenobi. They just captured the planet Christophsis.
Then contact them immediately.
Star Wars: The Clone Wars was an epic animated series that filled in the story between the prequel movies Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith. This wasn't just a kid's cartoon. It was a complex, mature series that explored the dark themes of war and politics in the Star Wars universe. It was a huge hit for Cartoon Network, winning awards and drawing in millions of fans, both kids and adults. The show was planned for 8 full seasons and was at the height of its popularity. Then, in 2012, Disney bought Lucasfilm, the company that makes Star Wars. And shortly after, the show was abruptly canceled after its 5th season, leaving major storylines unresolved. Now, the official reason was that Lucasfilm wanted to move on to new projects. But the thing nobody tells you is that The Clone Wars was airing on Cartoon Network, a channel owned by one of Disney's biggest competitors, Warner Brothers. The theory that makes the most sense is that Disney didn't want to be in the business of producing one of its most popular new properties for a rival network. They were also concerned that the show was becoming too dark and graphic for the more family-friendly image they wanted for Star Wars. A business rivalry is a tough break. But our next show was killed to make room for a reality show that history has completely forgotten. 9. Veronica Mars.
Why don't you take a closer look at the one on top? Read what's written over Grant's head.
Veronica Mars is smarter than me.
Oh, you stop it.
Veronica Mars was a brilliant teen noir mystery series that was way ahead of its time. Starring Kristen Bell, the show followed a high school and later college student who moonlights as a private investigator in her California town. The show was incredibly smart, with season-long mysteries, witty dialogue, and a perfect blend of dark themes and teenage drama. It was a critical darling and had one of the most passionate fan bases in television. After 3 seasons, the show was on the bubble for renewal. The network it was on, the CW, had to make a choice. They could either bring back their critically acclaimed but modestly rated drama, or they could take a chance on a new reality show. They chose the reality show. And what was the show that took Veronica's place? It was called Pussycat Dolls Present: The Search for the Next Doll. That's right. A brilliant, groundbreaking drama was canceled to make room for a reality competition show to find a new member for a pop group. To add insult to injury, the reality show was a flop and was forgotten almost immediately, while Veronica Mars remains a beloved cult classic. Losing your spot to a reality show is rough, but our next show was also a cult classic, and it was canceled because of a power play between its creator and a nervous network executive. 10. Angel.
So, are you still...
Yeah, there's not actually a cure for that.
Right.
Angel was the dark and moody spin-off of the hugely popular show Buffy the Vampire Slayer. It followed the vampire with a soul, Angel, as he moved to Los Angeles and started a supernatural detective agency. The show was a huge success, developing its own dedicated fan base and often getting better reviews than the show it spun off from. For 5 seasons, it was a flagship show for the WB network. In its 5th and final season, the show was hitting a creative peak. The ratings were strong, and it was the 2nd highest rated show on the entire network. The creator, Joss Whedon, was feeling confident. He went to the head of the network and, in what he later called a moment of hubris, pushed for an early renewal for a 6th season. He wanted to give his writers job security and a head start on planning the next story. But the network executive didn't like being put on the spot. He saw the demand as a power play, an ultimatum. And to show who was in charge, he made a shocking decision. He called Joss Whedon's bluff and canceled the show. Just like that, one of the network's biggest hits was gone, not because of ratings or quality, but because of an ego battle in a boardroom. An ego trip is a crazy reason to end a show, but our next show was also an animated cult classic, and it was canceled because of a hunger strike. 11. Clone High.
Why, I watched the first 2/3 of the MC Hammer Behind the Music, and if there's one thing I've learned about money, it's that it never runs out.
Before they created hit shows like The Lego Movie and 21 Jump Street, the creative team of Phil Lord and Chris Miller made a bizarre and hilarious animated show called Clone High. The premise was pure genius, a high school populated by the teenage clones of famous historical figures like Abraham Lincoln, Joan of Arc, and Cleopatra. The show was a brilliant parody of teen dramas, full of smart jokes and historical references. It aired on MTV in 2002 and quickly became a cult favorite. But there was one character that caused a huge problem, the clone of Mahatma Gandhi. In the show, Gandhi was portrayed as a hyperactive, party animal teenager. The creators saw it as a funny, ironic take on the historical figure. But not everyone found it funny. In India, the portrayal was seen as deeply disrespectful to the memory of a revered national hero. There were massive protests. Over 100 politicians and activists, including Gandhi's own grandson, participated in a hunger strike in front of the MTV India offices, demanding the show be taken off the air. The international pressure was so intense that the network got scared and canceled the show after just 1 season, leaving it on a massive cliffhanger. A hunger strike is a wild reason for a cancellation. But our next show was ahead of its time, and it was canceled because audiences in the 90s just couldn't handle its main character. 12. Prophet.
Fortunately, Gail, I'm the only one who knows anything about this. I can go back to auditing and make the whole thing disappear. But I'm gonna have to ask you for one small favor.
In 1996, long before shows like The Sopranos or Breaking Bad made it cool to root for the bad guy, a show called Prophet hit the airwaves. It was about a sociopathic, morally bankrupt corporate executive named Jim Prophet who would do literally anything, including blackmail, bribery, and worse, to climb the corporate ladder. The show was dark, cynical, and incredibly well written. It was a savage critique of corporate greed that was years ahead of its time. But what many overlooked is that audiences in the mid-90s were not ready for an anti-hero. They were used to clear-cut good guys and bad guys. The main character of Prophet was a monster, and people were genuinely disturbed by him. The network, Fox, started getting calls from viewers who were horrified by the show's content. Even people within the television industry were uncomfortable with it. The show was so dark and so different from anything else on TV that the network panicked. After airing only 4 episodes, they pulled the plug, bowing to the pressure from an audience that simply wasn't prepared for a show so brutally honest about the dark side of ambition. Being too edgy can be a death sentence, but our next show was a critically acclaimed Western that was canceled because its creator and the network couldn't agree on how to end it. 13. Deadwood.
Who stole the f***ing dope? Cocksucker!
Deadwood was not your typical Western. Airing on HBO, this was a gritty, complex, and beautifully written drama about the founding of a lawless town in the American West. The show was famous for its intricate plot lines, its incredible acting, and its historically accurate, profanity-laced dialogue. For 3 seasons, it was considered one of the best shows on television, a true work of art. Everyone assumed it would get a proper, epic conclusion, but the show was incredibly expensive to produce. It had a massive cast and required elaborate, historically accurate sets. As the show was heading into its 4th season, there was a breakdown in negotiations between HBO and the production company that co-financed the show. HBO wanted to cut costs. They offered the show's creator, David Milch, a deal. Instead of a full final season, they would give him 6 episodes to wrap up the entire story. David Milch felt that 6 episodes were not nearly enough to give his complex characters and sprawling story a satisfying ending. He refused the offer, believing he could get a better deal. But HBO didn't budge. The negotiations fell apart completely, and the show was unceremoniously canceled, leaving fans with an unresolved story for over a decade until a wrap-up movie was finally made. A business dispute is a frustrating way to go. But our next show, a beloved sci-fi classic, was canceled because the network aired the episodes in the wrong order. 14. Firefly.
Keep the money. Use it to buy a funeral. It doesn't matter where you go or how far you fly. I will hunt you down.
It's a story that has become a legend among sci-fi fans. In 2002, Joss Whedon, the creator of Buffy, launched a new show called Firefly. It was a unique blend of space opera and Western, following the ragtag crew of a small transport ship on the fringes of the galaxy. The show was smart, funny, and full of memorable characters. It had the potential to be a massive, long-running hit, but the Fox network seemed determined to make it fail from day one. First, they hated the 2-hour pilot episode, Serenity, which introduced all the characters and the world. They thought it was too slow. So they decided not to air it first. Instead, the first episode they aired was the second one produced, The Train Job, which was a more action-packed but less introductory story. Then, they continued to air the episodes completely out of the creator's intended order. This made the character arcs and the overall story completely confusing for new viewers. To make matters worse, they aired the show on Friday nights, a time slot known as the death slot. With a confused audience and terrible ratings, the network canceled the show after airing only 11 of the 14 completed episodes. Airing episodes out of order is pure incompetence. But our next show was also a victim of network meddling, and you might be surprised to hear it's a show that's on the air right now. 15. Family Guy.
Jerome is an old boyfriend of mine.
What? Oh, sorry, I was out of it. Wait, are we being robbed?
It's hard to imagine now, but Family Guy, one of the most successful animated shows of all time, was actually canceled. Twice. When the show first premiered in 1999, it was an instant hit. The humor was edgy and hilarious, and it quickly found an audience. But once again, the Fox network seemed to have no idea what to do with a successful show. They began bouncing it around the schedule. Its time slot was changed constantly, and with little promotion, viewers had trouble finding it. The final straw came when the network put the show up against two of the biggest hits on television at the time, Friends and Survivor. The ratings plummeted, and Fox canceled it. But then, something amazing happened. The show's reruns on the Cartoon Network's Adult Swim block became a massive hit, drawing huge ratings. And when the DVDs were released, they sold millions of copies. The network realized they had made a huge mistake. The fan demand was so overwhelming that in a move that was unprecedented at the time, Fox uncanceled the show and brought it back, where it has been a pop culture giant ever since. Fan power can save a show. But our next show was a critical darling about the painful reality of high school, and it was canceled because the network wanted something more cheerful. 16. Freaks and Geeks.
George Bush is coming to speak to the school.
Star? The Vice President of the United States of America, George Bush.
Airing for just one season. In 1999, Freaks and Geeks is widely considered one of the greatest television shows ever made. It was a painfully honest and hilarious look at the lives of two groups of high school kids in the 80s, the Burnouts and the Nerds. The show launched the careers of a whole generation of stars, like Seth Rogen, James Franco, and Jason Segel. It was praised by critics for its realism and its heart. But that very realism is what got it canceled. The network, NBC, just didn't get it. The thing nobody tells you is that network executives at the time were used to sanitized, happy versions of high school life. They wanted the characters to be cooler. They wanted the geeks to have more victories and the freaks to be less aimless. In one infamous note from an executive, they complained, "We need more wins for the geeks." They didn't understand that the show's power came from its awkward, sometimes sad, honesty. They wanted a show that was more uplifting and aspirational, not a reflection of what high school is actually like for most people. After just 18 episodes, they pulled the plug on a masterpiece. Being too realistic can get you canned. But our next show was a beloved educational program that was canceled because of a law that was supposed to help kids learn. 17. Reading Rainbow.
Pizza. You know, Americans eat over 8 billion slices of it a year. Excuse me.
For over 25 years, Reading Rainbow was a magical part of childhood for millions of kids. Hosted by the wonderful LeVar Burton, the show's mission was simple: to inspire a love of reading. Each episode would explore a book and then connect its themes to the real world. It was a beautiful, gentle show that celebrated the power of imagination. It won countless awards, including over 25 Emmys and a Peabody. So how could a show this beloved and important get canceled? The answer is a frustrating piece of government bureaucracy. In 2001, the No Child Left Behind Act was passed. This law changed the way the government funded educational programming. The new rules put a heavy emphasis on teaching the basic mechanics of reading, like phonics and spelling. A show like Reading Rainbow, which was designed to foster a love of literature in kids who could already read, no longer fit the government's narrow definition of what educational TV should be. Its funding was cut, and one of the most important and successful children's shows in history came to an end because of a change in educational policy. Losing funding over a technicality is heartbreaking. But our next show, an iconic piece of pop culture, was canceled because someone accidentally threw away the sets. 18. Batman to the Batmobile.
I am a little hungry.
Of course, Robin. Even crime fighters must eat. And especially you. You're a growing boy and you need your nutrition.
The 1960s Batman TV series starring Adam West and Burt Ward was a cultural phenomenon, with its campy humor, vibrant colors, and POW, bam! Fight scenes, it was a massive hit. For 3 seasons, Batmania swept the nation. The show was a ratings powerhouse for the ABC network. But by the end of the 3rd season, the ratings had started to slip a little. ABC decided to cancel the show. However, the rival network, NBC, was ready to save the day. They agreed to pick up the show for a 4th season, knowing it still had a huge audience. There was just one tiny problem. In the short time between ABC canceling the show and NBC agreeing to pick it up, someone at the studio had made a colossal mistake. Thinking the show was gone for good, they had demolished all of the expensive and iconic sets, including the Batcave. The cost to rebuild everything from scratch was estimated to be over $800,000, a massive amount of money at the time. Faced with that huge bill, NBC changed their minds and backed out of the deal. The Caped Crusader was taken down not by the Joker, but by a bulldozer. Accidentally destroying the set is a wild mistake. But our next show, another beloved animated series, was canceled because it wasn't selling enough toys to the right demographic. 19. Young Justice.
I would be honored to help find him.
Me too! So honored, I can barely stand it. Magic rocks!
Young Justice was a critically acclaimed animated series from DC Comics that followed the adventures of a team of teenage superheroes like Robin, Superboy, and Aqualad. The show was praised for its mature storytelling, its complex character development, and its long-form, serialized plot lines. It was a huge hit with fans who loved its sophisticated take on the DC universe. But the show's success with its audience wasn't enough to save it. The thing nobody tells you is that for many of these shows, the TV series itself is just a long commercial designed to sell toys. And Young Justice had a problem. The show was a hit with both boys and girls. In fact, a large portion of its audience was female. And while this might sound like a good thing, for the toy company that was a partner on the show, it was a disaster. They had designed a toy line that was aimed almost exclusively at young boys. When the girls watching the show didn't buy the action figures, the overall toy sales were a disappointment. The show's primary financial backer, the toy company, pulled their funding, and Cartoon Network canceled the show because it had failed at its main job, selling plastic to boys. Losing your show over toy sales is a tough pill to swallow. But our final show was a groundbreaking sitcom that was canceled because its star made a brave and honest personal decision. 20. Ellen.
What do you think? Should I smile or not smile? Let me see you smile. Yeah, you've seen my smile before. I need to see it again.
In the mid-90s, the sitcom Ellen, starring comedian Ellen DeGeneres, was a solid hit for ABC. It was a funny, relatable show about a single woman and her quirky group of friends. For 4 seasons, it was a reliable part of the network's comedy lineup. Then, in 1997, Ellen DeGeneres decided to do something that had never been done before on American television. She, along with her character on the show, came out as gay. The episode, titled The Puppy Episode, was a cultural landmark. It was watched by over 42 million people and was praised for its bravery. But not all things are what they seem. Behind the scenes, the network and its parent company, Disney, were terrified of the backlash. After the coming out episode, some conservative groups called for a boycott of the show and its advertisers. The network started putting a parental advisory warning before each episode. Advertisers began to pull out. The show's tone became more focused on LGBTQ issues, which the network felt was too preachy. Despite still having good ratings, the network lost its nerve. They canceled the show after the next season, a decision that was widely seen as a punishment for the show's groundbreaking honesty.